Alrighty guys, so as soon as I saw this video, I knew I had to react to it. And there's two reasons for this. Number one, both Kyle Kulinski and Jordan Peterson have been kind of formative in my way of thinking in different periods of my life. The second reason is that at the time that I was listening to Jordan Peterson, I actually voted for Donald Trump, who they are now discussing. Back in 2016, I voted for Donald Trump. Obviously, there's been quite a bit of character development since that point, to the point where now I am at least in America, considered a far leftist. And Kyle Kulinski was really formative in helping bring me to that point and get me out of the state of thinking that I was brought up in. Of course, a little backstory on me, for those of you who might not know, I was raised in a evangelical fundamentalist, conservative Christian homeschooling household. I was homeschooled K through 12. And so when it was Donald Trump versus Hillary Clinton, it was a pretty clear choice for me, right? But the thing is, too, at this point, I had already made some evolutions past what I was brought up in. And the reasons I actually voted for Donald Trump, in hindsight, we're actually relatively on the progressive scale of things, and I still hold these positions now. First one was really he was going to end the wars. I was already of the opinion that all of these wars were bullshit and we need to get out of them, and Donald Trump ran on as the guy who was going to do that. Another reason was that Donald Trump was talking about being the first president to go into office who was for gay marriage. I was of the opinion that that was a good thing as well, even at that point. He was also talking about how he was going to no longer be outsourcing our jobs, and he was going to be the president for the working class. And I was very much in favor of that, and saw that Clinton was everything wrong with the establishment, and she just embodied that. And so Trump was the obvious example to go over with that. Then, of course, there were gun rights. Now, I am now a under no pretext lefty. For anyone who's not familiar, under no pretext is the Karl Marx quote where he says, "Under no pretext shall arms and ammunition be surrendered, and any attempt to disarm the workers must be frustrated by force if necessary." Very basic quote. But at that point, I was still a shall not be infringed Second Amendment guy, which, by the way, I don't disagree with in any capacity. I just think that under no pretext is significantly more explicit and hard to misconstrue, so I prefer that. But at that time, Donald Trump was running as he was going to be the one to save our gun rights. And Hillary Clinton, of course, was talking about assault weapons bans, and that freaked me the fuck out. Still does. But yeah, and so here we're going to have a debate. I haven't watched this yet, but it's between Kyle and Jordan talking about the Trump record, and I'm sure at least a couple of those points that I just brought up are going to come up. I do just want to give a little bit of a spoiler for anybody who might not have paid too much attention during the Trump years. Every single thing that I just pointed out as the reasons I voted for him, he broke those promises, and he went against what he campaigned on, which is also a big part of why I did not vote for him a second time, right? That would make me a giant sucker if I voted for him again after he broke every promise and every reason that I actually went out and voted for him the first time. Also helps that I went significantly left in those 4 years. But here we go. I'm very curious to see how this conversation goes and what Kyle has to say, because I'm very confident that Jordan Peterson is going to defend the record of Trump. Kyle's going to absolutely destroy it. But let's see how this goes.
If you were an American citizen, you were here in the 2020 election, would you have voted for Trump, Biden, nobody, or a third-party candidate?
I don't know. It's very hard to answer those questions until you're actually in the situation. When Clinton was facing off against Trump, for a very long time, I felt that I would have voted for Clinton. I felt that she had at least the administrative background and the governmental experience to know what the job was and to handle it. I felt that Trump was a wild card, which he most definitely was. Then I went to this, the night of the election, I went to this Republican gala in Canada at a private club, watching the election, and they did a straw vote there. And in the straw vote, I cast my vote for Trump. And that surprised me. And it was something I sort of switched on last minute. And the reason I switched, I would say, is because I thought Clinton betrayed the working class.
Which, again, so that circles back around, right? So what I was talking about, Trump was not going to outsource the jobs. Trump was going to bring the jobs back. He was going to raise our wages. He was going to bring manufacturing back to the United States and boost that for the working class. He was going to save the Rust Belt, all these different things, right? As opposed to Clinton, who, Bill Clinton destroyed all that. And then Bush and Obama certainly didn't help. And Hillary Clinton was kind of just seen as emblematic. and really just being a part of that system that really fucked the working class. And so, Jordan Peterson here is talking about how, he saw that as well. And he's not wrong. However, Trump turned out to not be the answer, as I personally found out, right? I don't know if Jordan Peterson is going to come to that conclusion or not. But for example, the main thing is Donald Trump's greatest achievement in office was a tax cut for the wealthy. And as far as outsourcing jobs, it just continued, right? And I believe it actually increased during his presidency. We'll see if they get onto that. Kyle probably has a much better memory on this stuff than I do.
In fact, that's why she lost the election. It isn't something I just felt. That's definitely what happened. And so I thought, to hell with you. I'd rather have this wild card in here with his spontaneous lies than have you in here with your programmatic, powered, mad, driven, pre-authorized lies.
Okay, and so lesser of two evils voting, which at the time I actually agreed with. I had an opinion at the time that choosing to vote third party instead of voting for Trump was handing the election to Clinton. I know, incredibly cringe. Because now, as somebody who voted third party in the last election, I see how absolutely foolish this is and how voting for the lesser evil is still voting for evil. Absolutely. There's no way around that. And that pretending you're holding some kind of moral high ground over third party voters is absolute bullshit. But, that was it at the time. Sounds like Jordan Peterson's on the same page.
So I don't know. It's hard to tell what you'll do in this situation until you're actually in it.
Do you think Trump as president in his 4 years also betrayed the working class?
Not in the same manner, no.
Really?
I think Trump did some things that were really quite spectacular.
Like
one
what?
of them.
Like what?
Well, how about no war?
Well, he did
Oh, I was about to say Cap, but let's see what Kyle's got.
assassinate a top Iranian commander who was fighting ISIS
I didn't
on the ground.
say that. I didn't say anything about assassination. I said something very specific.
Assassination is an act of war. So, for example, if Iran had assassinated, who the fuck are our generals? I don't know. Mad Dog Mattis, right? That's just a name that comes to mind. I don't think he's active anymore. But let's say that, Iran had assassinated him. We would have turned Iran to glass. And, actually, compared to most of our other military action in post-World War II, that would have had more justification than most of them, right? So, but here we have an example of somebody seeing the U.S. exerting its power in an absolutely psychotic imperialist way as not being an act of war, when an assassination of a high-ranking government official, specifically a military official of another nation, is absolutely an act of war.
I would say that's an act of war.
Okay.
No,
yep.
It's not an act of war. It's an assassination. An act
To
of
kill
war.
an Iranian commander.
Come on.
I don't understand the point you're making.
Well, I'm trying to say if the Iranians killed one of our generals, we would call that an act of war. We do it to them.
All right, see, so this is how you know I've been watching Kyle for way too long, because we come to the exact same conclusions independently of each other.
Them, and it's not an act of war?
All right, then I guess we have to differentiate between an act of war and a war. What you have right now with Russia?
True. Okay. All right. So proxy war in Ukraine with Russia. Yeah. So he's right about that. But let's talk about the fact that we exponentially increased our drone warfare by almost 4 times. No, we did not invade any new countries. And that is actually a point to Trump's credit. He was the first president in my lifetime to not add a new war to what we were doing. However, that's only if you don't consider it an act of war to attack Iran. And more importantly, and less disputably, him drastically increasing our drone warfare, which whistleblower Daniel Hale proved kills almost 90% the wrong people, not the intended targets, often civilians and non-combatants and kids and journalists, etc. That, when you increasingly pump that up with the knowledge that it is actually that bad and you are killing that many non-combatants, again, almost 90%. You cannot stress that point enough. You cannot make the case that that president is somehow anti-war in any way.
That's a war. And
Yeah,
Trump did not engage the U.S. in a war of that sort. And so that was a signal contribution. He also established the Abrahamic Accords, which have got nowhere near enough attention, not nearer the attention they deserve. And the people who negotiated that should have won a Nobel Peace Prize, because that brings the possibility of peace to the Middle East. And that was a big accomplishment, both of those things.
Do you consider the giant increase in drone strikes under Trump problematic?
Once again, same point.
What do you mean problematic? Do you mean desirable?
do you, because you said, oh, he didn't get us in a new war, but I would
What?
consider all those bombings, which are illegal, by the way, an act of war. Do you
I
think
didn't
that
say
those are...
that Trump. I didn't say that Trump's record was unblemished, or that there weren't skirmishes of various sorts. I'm not trying to paint him. I'm not trying to paint him beige, or I'm not trying to whitewash him. I'm perfectly aware of Trump's flaws and his advantages, but he didn't embroil the U.S. in a war, and you guys have been embroiled in a pointless war for what? How long now? Since the 1960s, one after another, and then the Abraham.
Actually, before even, you could make a very strong case that Korea had nothing to do with us caring about freedom and democracy, and everything to do with geopolitical influence in China's backyard.
Accords are a big deal, and did he betray the working class? Well, I think that's in some sense it's a vague question. Hillary definitely betrayed the working class because she decided to go with the woke mob instead of instead of the
The woke mob. I'm sorry. As a self-described member of the woke mob, Hillary Clinton has nothing to do with us. In fact, if anything, Hillary Clinton, more than anything else, I'm mostly joking about part of the woke mob, but if anything, Hillary Clinton spends a lot of her time bashing actual leftists and bashing the woke mob and saying that we need to get rid of this because we can't win elections with this. When in reality, actually, no, you can't win elections as a centrist, status quo Democrat, defending the status quo that is no good for anybody and is continuing to fuck the working class like you and your husband have doing for the last 25 years, right? So to paint Hillary Clinton as a panderer to the woke mob, that's a surprising take, but I think it kind of shows Jordan Peterson is one of those guys who talks a very big game and uses a lot of big words and goes around in various tangents. It kind of confuses you. And so if you don't know much, it's very easy to think that he's very smart. Ultimately, he's just kind of detached from reality. And so he uses buzzwords like woke mob that don't actually really mean much of anything. He probably could not define this very well if he was pressed on this. We'll see if Kyle does. But just the fact that he's putting Hillary Clinton in with the woke mob proves my point. He doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about.
The typical base of power that the Democrats had always relied on. So
can I give
that was
you an
a conscious
example?
decision.
Can I give you an example on Trump betraying the working class? Because there's a few things you could point to. First of all, there was net outsourcing of jobs under his administration when he campaigned as the opposite.
Net
The second
outsourcing,
thing is
okay.
his number one legislative accomplishment was a 2017 tax cut where 83% of the benefits went to the top 1%. So those are two examples of, he campaigned as the anti-outsourcing guy, then there was net outsourcing under his administration. And in fact, that same tax bill incentivized outsourcing. And then again, that tax bill mostly benefited the wealthy, and it didn't help the working class. So that's what I mean by betraying the working class. I think he campaigned in a very populist way, but in terms of how he governed, it was very sort of standard establishment Republican, just like George W. Bush, for example.
Which should not surprise anybody. When you have somebody who's been a New York Democrat their entire life, he's not going to suddenly, let me clarify, a New York Democrat, womanizer, playboy, generationally wealthy, whatever, that's not going to be your working class hero. That's not going to be your Christian constitutionalist, as people were looking for at the time. That's just absolutely obvious bullshit. And so the fact that he actually managed to pull off rebranding himself that way, number one, it shows he had quite a team behind him, but number two, it also just kind of shows the gullibility of the American people. And I'm calling myself out, by the way, because at the time I believed that. But it also, more importantly, it kind of shows the desperation of the people at the time. Because what people don't understand, Trump did not get elected because things were so good under Obama for the working class, right? The fact that Trump is now likely to get reelected in 2024 is not because things are going well under Biden. That should be self-evident, right? So this is the thing. People are so desperate for someone to come and save them that they will cling to the idea that somebody like Donald J. Trump is a populist hero looking out for the working man. But this really kind of boils down to the really important point that I have only really truly understood in the last couple of years, and that is one half of the ruling class is not coming to save us from the other half of the ruling class. That is not how that works.
Yeah, well, I don't have any real comments on that. Like I said, I'm not.
All right, so if we back up a second here, what do you ask?
Very sort of standard establishment Republican, just like George W. Bush, for example.
Yeah, so Kyle's saying that these are these different things as far as like outsourcing and tax cuts for the rich and the corporations and whatnot, billionaires. This is how Trump betrayed the working class, and he didn't actually help the working class. And Jordan Peterson, who was making the point of, yeah, but Donald Trump was here to save the working class, and now he says,
yeah, well,
I don't have any comment.
on that. Like I said,
Come on, dude. Come on. It's too easy. It is genuinely too easy. But here's the thing. When you have somebody like Jordan Peterson, you should stop taking them seriously well before this, well before they get to the point of debating the merits of the president of the United States. You should stop taking them seriously at the point of them going on and on and on about traditional masculinity and preserving traditional masculinity and how today's men are too effeminate, and then be him, right? So somebody who cries on camera in public regularly over very small things, somebody who here's the thing, just looking at him, right? And I'm not saying this to pick on him. I'm not saying this to pick on anybody. I'm of the belief that you can be every bit as much a man and present however you want and act however you want. I really don't give a shit. I personally, I'll go out in a skirt sometimes. Fuck it. It's fun. Genuinely, because it triggers people like him. But my point is, you can't present yourself as like this defender of traditional masculinity and we all need to be lumberjacks and then be like this, right? So this is a problem with Jordan Peterson. This is a problem with Tim Pool. This is a problem with Ben Shapiro, right? Where it just doesn't add up. And that's the point where you should stop taking them seriously on pretty much anything they say after that. And here's the thing. You don't have to speculate that you don't want to take them seriously on anything they say after that. You can just hear them put their foot in their mouth like this.
Trying to whitewash the Trump administration. I'm just pointing to a couple of things that he did that he hasn't got credit for.
Yeah, you
should have
him,
got credit for.
I actually enjoyed, you were on the PBD podcast, I think it was recently, and you made a comment that you found Trump whiny, particularly over the, common refrain that he can't stop saying he thinks the election was stolen. And correct me if I'm wrong. But
wait, is it TOS to say stop the rhymes with deal? That's interesting. Okay.
Your commentary was like, move on.
Well, I think it's a strategic error on his part, at minimum. I mean, Trump portrays himself and thinks of himself as a winner, and part of his attractiveness on the populist front was his unabashed, victorious persona, let's say. And he's the guy that gets things done.
Yeah, and here's the thing. I remember that, right? I remember that he looked like a winner. He looked like he would be a strong leader, whereas Obama did not seem to be a strong leader. He was not protecting us from, whatever it was that we were hyped up about at the time, whether it was our jobs getting outsourced by corporations, whether it was, the border crisis, which I've now come to see is quite overblown and kind of just some made up bullshit. But here's the deal, Donald Trump portraying himself that way, it definitely worked at the time. And here's the thing, because now he kind of has gone into his, Kyle Kulinski calls it his Fox News grandpa mode. Just talking about culture warrior and, well, we used to say Merry Christmas. We don't say Merry Christmas anymore, but now we do because I made it happen. Whereas in 2016, if you watch his campaign ads, he's out there in a hard hat on a construction site talking about, we're going to make America great again for the working people. And I was like, yeah, it's kind of attractive, Now, in retrospect, of course, obviously didn't pan out that way, and I fully admit that. That's why I didn't vote for him again. But to Jordan Peterson's point here, this is actually correct. Him portraying himself as the victim of, oh no, I got the election stolen, and now I cannot shut the fuck up about it. Not a good look.
Done, and he's the guy that wins.
Oh, especially when you can't prove it.
But apparently, the election was stolen from him. And so that begs the question, are you the winner and the guy that gets things done, or are you the guy that lets things be stolen from you? And the answer that Trump had always had was, well, I'm not the guy. I'm not that guy. I don't know who else I am, but I'm definitely the winner here. And I think that now campaigning as if he was the victim, let's say, of a plot isn't going to do him any good. I think it was probably a fatal decision from a strategic perspective because it's so off-brand. And that has nothing, that's completely independent of whatever virtue the argument about the stolen election might have. Well, I don't believe that the that the judiciary in the United States is so corrupt that the possibility of a valid finding on the election fraud front has been reduced to zero. I don't find that credible. And I do think, so I also think that it's a mistake on that front. And it's
It's actually really interesting that he's talking about the integrity of our elections, when we actually know full well, at least from the DNC, right? You know, WikiLeaks actually published evidence that in 2016 they robbed Bernie. They actually colluded and basically corrupted their own primary to make sure that Hillary Clinton won their primary, right? So she would be the one to run against Trump, not Bernie, which ultimately ended up being a fatal flaw. And, you know, in every poll, Bernie would have crushed Trump. He probably would still be president right now. But instead, we had Hillary Clinton, who was obviously not going to beat anybody. And so that's what they did. But that just kind of proves that the Democrats hate progressives even more than they hate Republicans. You want to know why? It's because Democrats are Republicans. We on the left, we don't hate Democrats because we like Republicans. We hate Democrats because they are Republicans. So, but anyways, to get back to what he's saying here, it's a little weird for him to be putting up such a strong defense of our political institutions as if they're so incorruptible and so safe. But then also to this point, with the deal, TOS, it's one of those things where there was no proof, right? This also brings around to like January 6th, for instance. I can think of a lot of valid reasons to go protest and storm in the Capitol. You know, not with zip ties, not with the gallows outside, and not any of that. But for storming the Capitol, I can think of a lot of valid reasons to do that have happened, right? But to stop a democratic election based on bad evidence is not one of them.
Mistake for conservatives. It's a real mistake for conservatives to take that route, because conservatives can't say all the institutions are corrupt and untrustworthy. That's what the radical leftists say. And populists can...
And we're right. See, and this is the difference, right, between like right-wing conspiracy theories and left-wing conspiracy theories. Right-wing conspiracy theories involve lizard people and fucking gay frogs. Leftist conspiracy theories are more along the lines of, hey, look at this thing the CIA literally admitted they did. Look at this thing that was proven by Julian Assange and WikiLeaks, or Daniel Hale, or Chelsea Manning, Edward Snowden, and look at what we literally have proof that our government did. Look at like Abu Ghraib. Do you really think that was the only one, or do you think that they were just the only ones who got caught? That's a leftist conspiracy theory, but somehow we're labeled the crazy ones.
Conservatives tend to do that, and that really leaves them with nothing except maybe an appeal to public whim, and that's no way to govern. So I think that was a mistake too.
You know, in your commentary, I do often hear a strong defense of our institutions, and I do feel like one of the common things that defines the current political era is definitely populism that bubbles up on the left through the vessel of, say, a Bernie Sanders, and even what I would argue was a fake populism that came up on the right with Donald Trump, where the agreement...
Yep, that's absolutely what it was, right? So, and because anytime that I've voted, it's because I've come at it from a populist angle. Everybody I hang out with, if they vote, it's from a populist angle. It's fuck these institutions. They've obviously been screwing all of us over for our entire lives, and like before our parents were even born, these institutions were doing all this. So now we're trying to vote our way out of that. I am now of the opinion that we probably can't vote our way out of that, right? But that is basically where the movements go now. It's like you have to either be populist or you have to be good enough at faking it that you trick enough people to get a nomination.
Does seem to be, well, hold on, these institutions are really not working for us, and they're broken, and they're fundamentally corrupt. And, you know, the genesis of it being you have this donor class of corporations and billionaires that donates to politicians, and then they get elected and do the bidding of that donor class and the corporations. Do you disagree with that analysis? Do you think that that's just overstating the problem and the institutions are actually healthy, or?
Well, I think it's partly a Tower of Babel problem. So I've been listening a fair bit to...
This is where Jordan Peterson gets genuinely entertaining, is when he goes philosophical on really not philosophical things. So let's see where he goes with this.
Russell is very, very smart. He's definitely one of the smartest people I've ever met. He's unbelievably sharp. And he differs in his political utterance.
That's very interesting that he cites Russell Brand as one of his main people. I can see it. I can see it because Russell Brand does come at everything from a much more like philosophical, like spiritual enlightenment type of angle, right? And so he has some genuinely unique takes on the left by doing it that way. It's interesting that he gets respect from somebody like Jordan Peterson with that, when Russell Brand is a very vocal socialist. I'm curious where he goes with this.
Differences from me to a substantial degree, although there's a fair bit of commonality as well. He's beating the anti-capitalism drum in a manner that I tend not to. But there's a specific reason for that. And the reason is that Russell has realized that size is a problem. And you know, the lefties tend to be skeptical of big government, and the right-wingers tend to be the lefties tend to be skeptical of big companies.
Yeah,
and
there we go.
Right-wingers tend to be skeptical of big government.
Right.
And I think the right way forward through all that mess is that we should be skeptical of big.
But that's all. Let me know what you thought. I thought it was cool. I like it. Vibes. Peace.